The midday sun at the old market seemed to tear the earth apart. Heat rose from the cracked concrete, making the air shimmer in wavering waves, so heavy it felt impossible to breathe. In a shadowed corner where two rusted iron sheets once served as a fence and now bent away from each other, a scene struck a middle-aged man's eyes so hard it stopped his heart for a beat. The head of a tiny Doberman puppy, no more than a month old, was trapped in the narrow gap. Its neck was pressed tight, tongue forced out from lack of air. Wide eyes, bloodshot and raw, streamed with tears that carved tracks through the dust and grime clinging to its fur. No sound came, no bark, no whimper, only a gaze. A gaze that begged with every fiber, as if asking the world itself, "Why won't anyone save me?" One tear slid down onto the cracked earth. It was the last. The frail body trembled, then weakened like a candle about to go out. Strangers passed by, some with cold glances. A man in a wrinkled shirt smirked. "It's just a dog." The words cut through the air, sharp as a blade to the heart of anyone who heard. Daniel Moore, 57, a carpenter who had lived his life with the smell of sawdust and the ring of hammers, froze. His gray eyes blurred in the blinding light. He whispered, voice rough, caught in his throat, "If I walk away now, this cry will follow me to the end of my days." He dropped to his knees. The heat seared up from the ground. Rusted metal dug into the puppy's head, leaving dark red marks. Its tiny body barely clung to breath, as fragile as paper about to be blown away. Daniel reached out, but the gap was so tight that only his skin was scraped raw. He couldn't move the metal. His heart pounded, sweat dripping onto the puppy's brow. In that moment, the world shrank to just two beings, one life caught between death and survival, and one man who could not turn away. Daniel bolted upright, sprinting to his old truck parked a few yards away. He tore through his toolbox and pulled out a metal saw, his faithful tool for cutting wood. But today it would not cut wood. It would cut iron. For life. He rushed back, knelt, and locked the saw in place. Each stroke screeched against the metal, piercing like a countdown to death. Sparks spat from rust as steel met steel. Sweat fell, soaking the ground, mingling with the dried tears on the puppy's cheeks. "Hold on. Just a little longer," Daniel muttered, eyes fixed on the fragile creature. The puppy's paws twitched, scratching weakly at the cement. Its breathing stuttered, sometimes stopping altogether before bursting back like a broken machine. Each jolt tore through Daniel as though it were his own pain. The man from before still lingered nearby, shaking his head with a careless scoff. "Why bother?" Just a stray mutt. Daniel didn't answer. His jaw clenched, strokes sharper, harder. Inside his mind, another voice rose. "No. Not just a dog. A life. And it's trusting me." The saw bit deeper. The metal groaned, and fractures spread. The puppy's eyes fluttered shut, head sinking as if surrendering. Daniel shouted, voice breaking against the sunlit air. "No! You're not leaving me!" The final cut. A sharp crack. The iron snapped apart. The small head slipped free, limp, into his waiting arms. The body hung motionless, no struggle left, no sound. Daniel staggered, clutching it tight against his chest. His own chest heaved, while the silence in his arms was unbearable. He pressed his ear to its ribs. A heartbeat, weak, so faint. His heart clenched. He whispered, a vow carved into his soul. "I will not let you die here. Not ever." He scooped the puppy up, his calloused hands smeared with rust and blood. Without a glance behind, He rushed toward his truck. Behind him, the market still buzzed, footsteps still wandered, indifferent. But in Daniel's mind, all sound fell away. Only the faint heartbeat in his arms remained, and the race had begun, his race against death itself. The old truck roared to life, tires grinding over the cracked pavement. Daniel gripped the wheel hard, eyes locked on the small figure curled on the passenger seat. The puppy's breathing came in threads, each one fragile, ready to snap. Its tiny chest rose and sank unevenly, and every falter clenched the blood in his veins. The road to the familiar veterinary clinic was less than 10 minutes from the market, but to Daniel it stretched into eternity. He drove as if racing the burning sun overhead. Rusted billboards blurred past. Strangers crossing the street seemed distant, indifferent, like shadows of a world that didn't care. He remembered that faded blue sign, white letters spelling veterinary clinic, the place where he had once taken his son's dog years ago. A place of safety, a place where doors opened to survival. But when he turned into the narrow alley, his heart dropped straight through him. The clinic's glass doors were locked. A wooden sign swayed in the hot wind. Relocated. Please visit our new facility on Maple Avenue. Daniel went numb. He threw himself from the truck, pounded the locked door, shouting until his throat tore. "Is anyone there? Please, it's dying." No answer. The street lay silent, save for cicadas buzzing in the heat. He leaned against the door, breath ragged, then turned back. On the seat, the fragile body shivered in waves, rasping breaths breaking apart. Daniel yanked the door open, lifting it into his arms. The pup's body burned with fever, light as ash, head limp against his chest. His rough hand pressed over its ribcage, searching for a heartbeat. Weak. So very weak. And then the old fear surged back. 5 years ago, he had watched his wife slip away in a hospital bed, powerless. He knew that feeling, the helplessness of life slipping from your grasp while you stood and did nothing. He couldn't let it happen again. Not this time. Not ever again. He dropped to his knees, clutching it tighter, whispering as though in prayer, "You can't give up. I've already lost too much." With a gasp, Daniel lay it back on the seat and turned the key. The engine growled, the temperature gauge quivering, but he didn't care. His knuckles whitened around the wheel as the truck lunged forward toward Maple Avenue. Then the red light flashed ahead. A line of cars blocked the way. Daniel slammed his palm against the wheel, vision blurred with anger and despair. No, not now. Not when every second matters. Horns blared behind him. He leaned across to the passenger seat, ear pressed to the pup's tiny muzzle. The breathing was ragged, broken, like wind through a hollow pipe. Suddenly, a faint whimper slipped out. So fragile, so thin, it almost vanished beneath the engine's noise. But Daniel heard it, a thread of sound, pulling him back from the abyss. Tears burst free, hot against his cheeks. Not loud sobs, but steady drops burning down his face. "I hear you. You still want to live. We'll make it. Trust me." The light turned green. He floored the gas, heart pounding like a hammer against iron. Every curve in the road, his eyes flicked to the passenger seat. The lids half closed, the cracked tongue showing between parted jaws. But the chest still rose and fell. Faint, but alive. The road to Maple Avenue had never been so long. Heat beat against the windshield, sunlight blinding, and the scent of rust still clung to the frail body beside him. Daniel clenched his jaw, whispering each word like a command. "Just a little further. You're not allowed to give up. Do you hear me?" In that moment, he understood. He wasn't only saving a dog, he was saving the piece of his own heart that had once gone dark. The truck thundered forward, swallowed in the scorching light, carrying a race that belonged to only two souls, one man who could not bear to lose again, and one fragile life fighting for its final breath. The truck screeched as it turned sharply onto Maple Avenue, tires shrieking against the pavement. The new building came into view, a gleaming veterinary sign, glass doors wide open, people inside. Daniel slammed the brakes, leaping from the cab before the truck fully stopped. He cradled the fragile creature against his chest and burst through the entrance, voice raw and breaking. "Emergency! He's not going to make it." Footsteps pounded across the tile. A nurse's eyes widened at the sight of the limp, overheated body in Daniel's arms. "Room 3, now!" The doors swung open. Harsh white light flooded in, the sharp sting of antiseptic filling his lungs. Daniel froze for a single heartbeat, then was swept forward by the staff. His hand refused to let go until a doctor in a white coat and gloves stepped up, firm and commanding. "We need him immediately." "Release him, now!" Daniel hesitated, his chest screaming not to let go. But those half-closed eyes, still pleading, still trusting, told him he must. He surrendered the pup as if giving away his very heart. They placed the small body on the cold steel table. The doctor bent close, frowning. "Heartbeat dangerously weak. Breathing irregular. Get the airway and IV ready." Orders cracked through the room, staff moving with precision. A tiny oxygen mask pressed over its muzzle. A needle slipped into a skinny leg, the IV line trembling with fluid. The monitor beeped, long and dragging, each tone chilling Daniel's skin. He backed against the wall, fists clenched so tight blood rose under his nails. In his mind flashed the hospital 5 years earlier. His wife's hand in his, the monitor rising and falling, then flattening to silence. His chest seized. "No, not again. Don't take another one from me." The doctor shouted, "Heartbeat crashing!" Shock it. A pad pressed to the fragile chest. A crackling snap split the air. The body jolted, then slumped again. The monitor screamed in one long, merciless tone. Daniel dropped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He couldn't look. He only heard his own heart hammering, suffocating him. The world hollowed out around him. The doctor barked, "Again! Now!" Another snap, silence. Then, beep, beep, beep. The rhythm returned, uneven at first, then steadier. A collective breath filled the room. The doctor pulled his mask down, voice softening. "He's back. Still fragile, but he's fighting." Daniel's head jerked up, tears blurring his vision. He pressed a trembling hand against his own chest, every beep pulling him back from the edge. He whispered, his voice breaking but sure. "You're still here, and so am I." A nurse laid a cool cloth over the puppy's tiny body, wiping away dust, dried blood, and the crust of rust. Watching, Daniel's chest ached. This fragile creature, once wedged in cold, merciless iron, now lay beneath bright lights, surrounded by hands determined to bring him back. A tremor ran through its hind leg. For a moment everyone froze. The body shivered, eyelids flickering as if straining to rejoin the world. The doctor nodded. "He hears us." "He hasn't given up." Daniel turned away, hiding his burning eyes. He knew it then. From this moment on, his fate was bound to this life. The puppy fought for each breath, and Daniel would fight to make sure it was never left behind again. The emergency room quieted after the earlier chaos. The monitor still chimed, but the beep, beep, came slow and fragile, each tone strung tight enough to make anyone hold their breath. A nurse stood guard over the vitals, hand ready on a syringe. No one dared look away. Daniel sat collapsed in a waiting room chair, hands folded as if to contain the storm wrenching his chest. Through the glass, he watched the small form lie motionless, an airway mask over its muzzle, fur damp from cool compresses. The thin legs trembled in faint waves, as though its spirit were lost inside a storm that only it must cross. Memories swamped him. The hospital 5 years before rose up sharp and clear. The white bed, his wife's weak hand tightening around his, then letting go, the heart monitor's spikes slowing to a flat, merciless line. He remembered that silence, how it squeezed the life from the room, the helplessness of watching someone you love slip away. His gaze settled on the puppy. The tiny chest heaved with labored breaths, like an old fan on the verge of stopping. The body was so frail that a single gust of wind might carry it off. Daniel shut his eyes and 2 tears slipped down his cheeks. "God, please don't make me lose another one," he whispered, voice breaking. A doctor came from the room, peeling off gloves, voice low. "We've stabilized him for now. But he's still extremely weak. Honestly, one more respiratory collapse and it's over." Daniel swallowed, the words stuck in his throat. He only nodded, eyes never leaving the figure beyond the glass. Inside, staff rotated shifts, patting the fur dry, maintaining the IV. For a heartbeat, the small body twitched. Alarms leapt, tit-a-tit, urgent and frantic. Daniel's blood ran cold. He sprang up, hands pressed to the glass, shouting until his voice tore. "No! Don't give up! Do you hear me? Don't leave me!" The people around him watched, but none spoke. All eyes were on the little hand trembling atop the resuscitation table. The doctor pressed the chest. A nurse held the airway. Seconds stretched like centuries. Then, a clear beep. Another. Then 3. The heartbeat returned, weak but steadier. Daniel sagged, shoulders shaking. He bit his lip until it split, whispering through ragged breath, "You're still fighting, and I'll be here all the way." A nurse stepped out and laid a cool hand on his shoulder, softly. "You should know, not every animal in this state pulls through. He has a very strong will to live." Daniel lifted his head. His eyes were blurred, but something like light had returned. Will to live. Of course. A tiny life, abandoned under that brutal sun, had clung to breath long enough to hope someone would come. Hope had waited for him. Under the harsh fluorescent lights in the white room, that frail body still breathed. Difficult, broken breaths. But breaths nonetheless. Each one was a quiet promise. Not surrendered. Leaning back against the wall, tears falling without end, Daniel realized he was not the only one keeping it from death. It was keeping him, too, holding him away from the cliff of memory. If it would not let go, neither could he. In that hush, he murmured like a vow to the sky, "If he lives, my life will be different. I will never turn my back on another life again." The monitor's rhythm steadied, clearer. For the first time since he saw it in the market corner, Daniel let himself believe the door to life was opening. On the 3rd morning since being rushed into emergency care, the recovery room was far calmer. Gentle sunlight filtered through the glass pane, spilling across the thin blanket where the small body rested. The raw wounds around its neck had been cleaned and dressed, the spindly legs wrapped neatly in bandages. An IV still pierced the fragile paw, but the breathing was no longer broken. It was slow, weak, but steady. Daniel stepped inside, his wooden-soled shoes clattering softly against the floor. He carried a cup of coffee gone cold, untouched. His eyes never left the tiny figure inside the glass enclosure. As he drew closer, the small ears quivered. Then, unexpectedly, the fragile eyelids lifted. Clouded pupils, dulled by days skirting death, drifted toward him. Just one look, and Daniel felt his heart leap. He sank to his knees, voice trembling but sure. "Hello, little one. I'm here now." The puppy tried to lift its head, trembling, then let it fall again. But in that moment he knew it had heard, had recognized him. A nurse entered, smiling at the sight. "You know, it's the strangest thing. He responds most strongly when you're here, as if you're his only anchor." Daniel pressed his lips together, afraid that if he spoke his throat would close. The nurse set a small bowl of water inside. After days of parched thirst, the puppy inched forward, its cracked tongue lapping slowly at each drop. Daniel's eyes never strayed. Every sip felt as if it were poured straight into his own heart. Then the nurse asked quietly, "Have you thought of giving him a name? Something that might make him feel like he belongs." The question stilled Daniel. Memory rushed back. The afternoon at the market corner, its head wedged between iron bars, eyes brimming with tears, the last drop falling into the dirt, and his own whisper then, "If I leave him now, this cry will haunt me for the rest of my life." He swallowed hard, his trembling hand pressed against the glass divider. His voice was rough but steady. "Hope. You'll be Hope. Because you've shown me that hope still exists, even when the world turns away." The room seemed to be still. The fragile creature lifted its head, those clouded eyes sparking faintly with a strange light. It staggered closer and pressed its damp nose against the narrow gap where Daniel's hand rested. His tears broke free, not the tears of despair, but tears of release. For the first time since his wife's death, Daniel felt his heart open to something beyond grief. The nurse quietly stepped away, leaving the two souls alone to find each other. Daniel leaned in, whispering like a vow. "Hope, do you hear me? We're moving forward now. I'll never leave you alone again." The puppy lay its chin upon his hand and closed its eyes. A long sigh escaped, light as a passing breeze. But within it was no surrender. It was trust. All that day, Daniel never left. He sat by its side, telling stories he had never dared share with anyone. He spoke of lonely nights in the silent wooden house, of calloused hands that touched nothing but cold timber. He spoke of fear, the fear of losing something precious once more. Hope didn't answer, of course, but he listened. Every time Daniel paused, the pup shifted faintly, ears flickering as if to say, "I'm here. Keep talking." By the time the evening sun streamed through the window, Daniel understood a truth he could not deny. He was no longer saving Hope alone. Hope was saving him, pulling him out of the silence that had bound him for far too long. A week after the moment she was named, Hope was no longer the same. Her coat still bore thin patches scorched by the sun, but her eyes were no longer clouded. They were brighter, more focused. Each time Daniel entered the recovery room, her little ears perked, and her frail tail gave a faint wag. Daniel came every day, carrying scraps of wood from his shop. He sat nearby, carving, telling stories as he worked. Hope listened, sometimes stretching forward to nuzzle the worn fabric of his old work pants. To Daniel, it was the clearest sign of all. She was healing not only in body, but in trust. One morning, the director of the clinic called him into her office. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a steady voice said warmly but firmly, "Mr. Moore, she's made remarkable progress. The doctors all agree. She is officially ready for adoption." Daniel went still. The words filled him with joy, yet pierced him like a blade, reminding him that a choice had to be made. The woman continued, "We've received several applications. In fact, One family drove over 200 miles. They'll be here this weekend to meet her, but—" She paused, looking straight into his eyes. "If you intend to keep her, we need to know." Daniel swallowed hard, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. In his mind, he saw again the rusted market corner, the tear-streaked eyes begging for help, and that fragile paw pressed against his hand when he called her Hope. I need a little time," he whispered. That weekend, the family from Nevada arrived, a young couple, eager-eyed, carrying a bag of toys and a brand-new blue collar. The staff led them to the backyard, where Hope was allowed into the sun for the first time. Daniel stood in the corner, silent. He wanted her to choose. Hope stepped into the yard, her gait still unsteady but curious. The couple knelt, arms outstretched, calling sweetly. Hope paused, tilting her head, then moved forward a few steps. Daniel's chest tightened. Maybe, he thought, she did belong in a young, lively home. But then, without warning, Hope turned. Her gaze sought him, deep and unwavering. Slowly, she left the couple behind and bounded toward Daniel, her tail wagging stronger than ever. She pressed her thin body against his leg, refusing to leave his side. Daniel froze. He knelt, hands trembling as they touched her back. You've chosen me." The couple exchanged a look, then offered soft smiles. The young woman said gently, "We understand. She's already found her family." They left quietly. Daniel sank onto the grass, Hope resting her chin on his knee, breathing steadily. In that moment, all doubt was gone. The answer had always been clear. The next day, he was called into the administration office. A file lay on the desk, the title stamped boldly, "Adoption Application. Hope." Below, a blank space waited for his signature. The staff member smiled. "Mr. Moore, you don't have to force yourself." But it's clear, she's already made her choice. Daniel turned. Through the glass, Hope stood in her small kennel, eyes locked on him, unblinking, unwavering. That look tethered him as if by an invisible cord. He drew a deep breath and took the pen. His hand trembled as the tip touched paper. At that same moment, Hope lifted her paw, pressing it against the glass exactly opposite his hand like a handshake through the barrier. Daniel laughed through tears as he signed. "From this day on, you belong to this family. And I belong to you." Around the room, a few staff members cried. Others applauded softly. A red collar with a silver heart-shaped tag was placed in his hands. Daniel knelt, fastening it gently around Hope's neck. She stretched forward, tail wagging, eyes glistening with light. In that moment, Daniel understood. The choice had never been his. From the blazing heat of that market corner to the steel table in the emergency room, to the instant he whispered her name, everything had led to this. Hope had chosen him all along. That afternoon, leaving the clinic with a small red collar gleaming around her neck, Hope settled snugly in Daniel's arms. In the truck, she curled on the passenger seat and let out a long, slow sigh, a breath of release after a long nightmare. Daniel drove in silence, the radio off, content with nothing more than the steady rise and fall of the little life beside him. At home, he set her down on the wooden floor. Hope hobbled about, tail wagging gently. She looked over the small house, the battered dining table, the faded family photos on the wall, the wood shop at the back that still smelled faintly of turpentine. That first night, Hope slept at the foot of Daniel's bed, curled on an old blanket. He woke often, only to listen to her breathing. Every soft rasp made him start up and press his hand to her back, whispering, "You're safe now. Sleep." The next morning, Daniel went into the shop, eyes wandering to the stack of pine boards in the corner. An idea sparked. He would build her a bed. Not a fancy one, but a snug little place she could call her own. He measured, cut, and fitted. The saw and hammer sang. Hope lay close by, watching each motion, sometimes coming forward to nudge the new plank with her wet nose, sneezing at the dust. Daniel laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. "Want to help?" "Fine. This will be our bed." Each time he hammered a nail, Hope flinched, ears pricked, but instead of fleeing, she edged closer, as if determined to take part. Her tail wagged constantly. Her eyes shone with curiosity. The bed was finished in 2 days. Small, sturdy, lined with a soft mattress Daniel bought on impulse at the nearby store, it took its place in the living room. He patted it. "Go on, try it out." Hope hesitated for a moment, then climbed in, turned once, and curled up with a deep, contented exhale, as if she'd finally found where she belonged. Her brown eyes lifted to him, bright. Daniel stooped and scratched behind her ear, voice breaking. "This is your home. And you're my family." In that instant, he couldn't hold back his tears. He wept, not from sorrow, but because his hardened heart had begun to wash clean. He cried, knowing that from a rusted market corner and the last tear fallen into the dirt, this small life had stepped into his and changed everything. That night, Hope did not sleep in the new bed. She hopped down and burrowed into the familiar spot at the foot of Daniel's bed, resting her head on his feet. He shook his head and smiled through tears. "All right then, the bed's for tomorrow. Tonight you stay here, right by me." Days passed. The wounds on her neck healed and her legs grew stronger. Hope followed him to the shop each day, circling while he worked, occasionally chewing a scrap of wood as if apprenticing herself to the craft. Customers came and everyone knew her, the little dog who survived the iron, calling her a miracle. Daniel only smiled quietly. In his heart, the miracle was not that she had been saved, but that she had saved him. Each night, when the lights went out, Daniel lay awake listening to her steady breathing nearby. He understood, with a clarity that steadied him. He was no longer alone. And more importantly, he would never again turn his back on a life crying out for help. Perhaps it is not only Daniel, or even me, but many of us who have faced that moment. A small life looking up at you with pleading eyes, trembling between life and death. He wanted to ask you, have you ever rescued an animal? And now, is that animal still by your side? Tell us your story. Perhaps your story will kindle hope and strength for someone else out there. Thank you for following this journey to the end. Thank you for letting your heart be moved, even once, by a voiceless life. If this story touched you, please subscribe, not to give us another number, but to find another companion, someone who believes in compassion, in second chances, in hope. We will meet again in other stories, about other eyes still waiting for an outstretched hand. And maybe next time, that hand will be yours.